All right, here we go again. Um, so we're going to talk about jet pumps just a little bit. This actually came up today at the counter. I'm going to thank young Master Dylan Howell for the idea to do this because a customer had called in and spoke to one of the other guys at the counter about jet pumps, and the topic got brought up. Hey, I don't really know how those work. So I kind of walked him through it, and I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. I should just do a video on that. So the first thing we need to talk about or understand about a jet pump is that we live in a world or a reality that is based around physical laws. And while we can work around those laws, we cannot break them. And having said that, when you're dealing with moving water from one place to another, it's much easier to push than it is to pull. So, submersible well pumps, they can be extremely deep in the ground, and you're able to pump water from there without a whole lot of trouble, but that's because the pump is down low and it's pushing. It's much, much easier to push than it is to pull. So jet pumps come in two varieties. Shallow well pump. This is a shallow jet pump or shallow well jet pump. The key thing here, less than 25 feet. That is the absolute maximum depth that you can pump water with one of these. Anything deeper than that, this will not work, because again, we live in a reality that is governed by physical laws. So the pump's above ground. This style of pump is called a centrifugal pump, which that's just how the motor and the impeller is laid out. That's what determines whether it's a centrifugal or not. And in this picture, that's your tank, your pressure vessel. Line going into it. There's the pump itself, and there's a line going down. That's going down through the well casing into the well seal into the well casing. And there's going to be a foot valve at the bottom, which if you've ever seen a foot valve before, it's a big piece of brass that has kind of like this. It's kind of like it kind of tapers down to a sharp point, not a sharp point, but like it tapers down, and there's like little holes inside that brass piece. That's a foot valve. That's what those look like. You've probably seen them on the shelf at some point. Now both of these are jet pumps, but on this one, you've only got one line going into the well. The jet is actually inside the pump itself. So what that jet does is when the pump is running, water is getting fed into that jet, kind of like a loop almost, and that creates basically creates a negative pressure inside the pump, which kind of boosts its power in a way. In other words, you're putting a vacuum in this line by using that jet, which lessens the effective head that's having to pump. These aren't really that common though. You'll see these sometimes, but they're fairly rare. What's more common is you can call it a double drop, or just call it a jet pump. When people talk about jet pumps, 9 times out of 10, this is what they're talking about. The only major difference is, first of all, you can go greater than 25 feet with it. But also, the jet is actually down here. So typically the way this is set up, you've got your tank, you've got your line going from the pump to the tank, and the centrifugal pump is here. And you'll have 2 lines coming out. Typically, you'll have a 1-inch line for the jet and an 1.25-inch line for the water being pumped out of the well. And here again, here's your well seal, and here's the casing. Now this foot valve that's down here is special. It's kind of like the other foot valve, but it's shaped a little different because it's got 2 ports on it. That jet that I was talking about up here, it's not in this pump. It's actually down here. And the way this thing works, when you're pumping water up out of the well, part of what you're pumping up makes a loop and goes back down. So essentially what this pump is actually doing is not just pulling, it's also pushing. So it's pushing and pulling at the same time. And that's because, again, like I said before, it's much easier to push than it is to pull. So that's how it's able to go at much greater depths. That's pretty much it. That's all there really is to them. As far as installing one of these things, one of the major pitfalls you run into is priming them, especially a double drop or one like this. There's a little port on the top of this, and both styles have this port on it. You crack that port open, you use a funnel or whatever you got, and a bucket or whatever you got, and dump water into it until it overflows. You plug it back up, put power back on the pump, and let it run until it starts whining. It'll make kind of like a shrill kind of. It's a very distinct change in the sound. And then open that port back up, pour more water in it, close it back up, because what you're doing is you're priming these lines, especially the jet line. And sometimes these things can be a bugger to prime. A lot of times when people install these things, if they're laymen, they won't properly prime it. They'll burn it up and it'll bring it back wondering why we sold them a bad pump. And that's not the case at all. It's because they didn't properly prime it. It can take quite a long time to prime one. The longest one I've ever had to prime, I think it took nearly 2 hours for me to get it fully primed. I don't like messing with these. I really don't. Just because of that. It's very time consuming to get these set up and running right. If you do sell one of these, just be very, very careful. I don't even like sizing them. I know how to. I don't even like doing that. If it's a layman that doesn't know what they're doing, I make it very, very clear to them that they need to properly prime it, and that I need to see a picture of the data plate of the original pump or some kind of documentation showing what kind of pump they had before I'll even go anywhere near it, because these things are really easy to burn up if you don't prime them right or if they're not sized right. See, a submersible pump, there's kind of, it's not really a safety factor, but just because of the way, the nature of the pump, the way it works, you've got a little more leeway in each direction of being more pump than you need or not enough pump. And they're significantly easier to prime. You just crack a valve and turn it on and just wait. This is much, much more involved. So just be very, very careful with these, and make it abundantly clear that to the customer, if they don't know what they're doing, they shouldn't be messing with it. This is not really a DIY friendly thing to install. Yeah. So that's about it. I can't think of anything else I want to cover on that. But just like I said, just be careful with these. And you guys have any questions, let me know.